Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Librarians Show. Please help me in welcoming your host, Patricio Escalante.
Thank you, showtime, baby, showtime. Can you turn off the lights, please? Keep them down. Hello, I'm Pato Escalante, and today we have an amazing show. We're gonna talk about a cast from A Mercy by Toni Morrison, who just released their new book about slavery and the rules of Virginia. Imagine being a slave, torture, sufferment, not being paid. Can you imagine that? This is a phenomenal book, and we would like to interview some of the special characters who make this book the book that it is. To start off, we would like to interview Jacob Bark. Give him a round of applause. What's up, JJ? Welcome to my show, baby.
Hi, Paddle. So nice to be here. Hi.
Today, we have a whole lot to talk about. So, it's been a long time since we last talked.
What are you talking about? I've never met you.
Okay, so first off, tell me a little bit about the book. Who
So,
are the people involved?
so the book is mostly about slavery and its origins in America. It's established in rural Virginia during the 1690s, and the first thing you need to know about is that the main character's name is Florence. She's a slave who was born into slavery. She didn't choose to do it, obviously. And the book starts off where she is sold to settle a debt between a farmer and a slave dealer. She's sold to a man named Jacob Vark, which is me. I buy Florence from a slave dealer named De Ortega, and the debt is gone. Then when I went to buy Florence, I went to De Ortega's house and I noticed that it was really pretty and I liked it very much. And so my goal from that point on was to have a house like that because it was really pretty and I wanted to have a house like that. And so I asked De Ortega what did he did to get the money to buy that house. And he told me that investing, and that investing was the way to go in order to win all that money in order to buy that house. So I started investing, and at first it wasn't so successful, but as time passed, I started having success and I started winning money and I started to have more opportunities, and I quickly started renovating my house. And so when I finally had enough money to buy and create my new house, I created a new one, and when we were building that house, we needed to put a fence around the property so that other people couldn't get in. And that's when I called a blacksmith, which is sort of like a handyman and someone who does labor and work. And this blacksmith was a black man, but he was free, he wasn't a slave. And so he started building the fence around the house so that we would feel more safe.
That's amazing. But can you tell me a little bit deeper about the slaves you had? How many were they? And were you one of the first ones to use them?
Well, yes, I was one of the first farmers in America to use slaves. Back in the late 1600s, it wasn't a thing yet, but I realized that having slaves was actually very beneficial to a farm, and so I had 3 of them. There was Lena, and there was Florence, and there was Sorrow. And there were actually rumors that Jacob, I had gotten them pregnant because I had raped them, but you will have to find that out for yourself in the book.
Pregnant? Wow, oh my gosh. Well, and tell me a little bit about the blacksmith. Who is he?
So he was the guy who was in charge of building a fence around the house, and when he came to work at the house, Florence, one of my slaves, actually fell in love with him. And so
Okay.
that is really what drives the plot and the main conflict of the book, what makes it interesting, because Florence falls in love with the blacksmith and he falls in love with her too, and so the story revolves around that and what they did.
So tell me a little bit about the ending. What
Okay.
happens?
Okay, so the ending begins when Jacob, fall sick and I die, and then my wife Rebecca is left in charge at the house, and she has to decide what everybody has to do and everything that goes on around the house. And so once the blacksmith finishes with his fence, he goes back to the city and he goes on with his life over there. But when Rebecca sees another problem around the house, she realizes that we need the blacksmith again, and so she sends Florence to get him. And when Florence goes to get him in the city, he goes to his house and she sees that he has a son, a little boy. And when Florence is waiting for the blacksmith to come home, the baby starts crying, and Florence, who is flustered and doesn't know what to do, she grabs the arm of the baby really firmly, and she actually breaks it. And so when the blacksmith comes home, his baby is with a broken arm, and he gets really mad at at Florence for this. And so they start fighting, and Florence hits him in the head with an object, and he gets knocked out, and Florence just flees and goes back to the farm. And she's really sad for the rest of her life, and every day she remembers the day that her mother sold her to Jacob, and the story ends like that with a really, really sad ending.
Oh my God. That's a very dramatic story. Okay, Jacob, thank you.
Thank you, Pablo.
Welcome back! So we now have another guest. Please welcome Slave Sarah.
Woo!
Nice to meet you. How are you?
Nice to meet you too. I'm fine. How are you?
Amazing. So I'm gonna ask you a few questions.
Sure.
The first one is, please elaborate on the conflicts that take part on the novel.
I think that the biggest conflict in this novel is it's an internal conflict, human versus self, and it takes place on one of my slave friends, Florence. When she was somewhat young, she was sold from her family, sold to Jacob Bork. And well, I think that this is the biggest conflict because Florence. It's an internal conflict because Florence thinks that her family doesn't love her. Her mom and her brother were gonna be sold, and her mom tells the man, like, just sell her. And well, this really affects Florence because she is constantly thinking about her mom and about how she never received love.
Okay. So, are these all the conflicts that take part on the story?
Well, actually, there are many conflicts throughout the story, but the ones I'm going to talk about are, I think, the main conflict. It's Florence, human versus self, about her thoughts about her mother, and another one with Florence, human versus human, versus the little baby of the blacksmith. Well, this is a conflict because Florence is jealous of this baby, and that's the reason why she breaks his arm. And well, that's a big conflict that affects the relationship between Florence and the blacksmith.
Okay. So, we have another character. Her name is Rebecca. Please welcome her.
Yeah.
Hello.
So, in this novel, Toni Morrison talks and describes what happens with slavery with a very dark tone. Can you tell us a little bit about this tone?
Oh, you see, Paro,
the tone Toni Morrison portrays here is really dark, kind of melancholic, and it's as a character here, it's kind of sorrow. But you see, Toni Morrison really tried to portray desire and want from the slaves of freedom. You know, the slaves had nothing almost. They were feeling really bad, like they had a really negative light.
And what's that? It's important that the slaves always had a sense of hope.
That's what I was gonna say that, Panel. You see, I was gonna say that the slaves, you know, they had almost anything, but the one thing they always kept was hope.
They always believed in themselves, right?
Yeah, you know, that's really great, you know, since people get to see some people with bigger struggles, and they kind of, you see them as role models since they went through and aspired to reach and go up and
Yeah. And that's a very interesting thing because slaves don't have a lot. And what happens is that they always have hope. So
Yeah.
thank you, Rebecca.
oh yeah, you're welcome.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome back. So our next character is one of the most important characters. Welcome the blacksmith. Give him a round of applause. How are you?
Great to have you.
So in the book, there's a lot of symbols that we don't understand as you do. So can you give us some symbols?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you the main symbol of the book, and that's the title. It's mercy. You know, it's a struggle. It's a constant fear that slaves had to live by. They had to live a life of a lack of mercy by their slave masters and pretty much anyone that wasn't a minority at those times. It was a harsh time, a lack of mercy.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. The next symbol, it's kind of obvious. It's sorrow. It's not only the character, one of the main protagonists. It's also a theme of the book. Sorrow is a character whose life is pretty melancholic. She pretty much anything that follows her or is near her ends up suffering just like she does.
Okay, so thank you, blacksmith. Okay, so finally we will introduce our last couple of characters. And it's Lena and Florence. And they were also slaves. Welcome them.
Yeah!
Welcome. Take a seat, please. So, today's interview, we have been talking about the symbols and everything about A Mercy by Toni Morrison. But we forgot about one of the most important things about a novel. Tell us about the themes of the book.
So first we can start about the theme of slavery. As we all know, slavery is the main theme of this book due to the fact that everything revolves around slavery. At the beginning of the book, we can see how they traded slaves and how the mom had to give up her little kid because of slavery. We can also see this throughout the book with different characters. One of them being myself, Lena, because I'm a Native American and I have been traded and I'm treated as a slave due to my race. And throughout the book, different characters are really involved around this powerful theme.
Okay. Thank you, Lena. And Florence, can you tell me another theme, please?
Another theme in this book is about the oppression in women and violence, and we can see this throughout the whole book because Lena, myself, and Sorrow are throughout the whole book oppressed by men, and we are basically owned by them, so they have the chance to do whatever they want. And I saw more than me, Sorrow and Lena were sexually harassed by men, and that's not fair, but this is a theme that goes throughout all the book because constantly we see how us, the slaves, are being bad treated by the men.
Oh, okay, so nice couple of themes. So thank you, Lena and Florence. And that's all. Thank you. Okay, guys, we have the finale of the show. And thank you for coming around and joining us with the cast from A Mercy by Toni Morrison. Thank you.